Margaret Hayes had lived 58 years, and she thought she'd learned all life's important lessons. She'd raised 3 children of her own, buried her parents, weathered a divorce, and built a successful career as a school administrator. She believed she understood how the world worked. But on a cool October morning, standing in the cemetery where her twin sons were laid to rest, a homeless woman would teach her something she'd never imagined. The anniversary came every year like clockwork. 23 years since the accident. Margaret and her ex-husband David still met at the graves, a silent agreement they'd never discussed but always honored. Some bonds even divorce couldn't break. The granite headstone bore 2 names, Christopher and Matthew Hayes, beloved sons, forever 7 years old. Margaret knelt on the damp grass, arranging fresh daisies. Her knees protested. Another reminder that time moved forward, even when your heart stayed frozen in the past. David stood behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder. They didn't speak much anymore, but on this day words weren't necessary. 23 years, Margaret whispered. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. David squeezed her shoulder gently. His hair had gone completely silver now. When had that happened? They were preparing to leave when Margaret noticed her. A young woman, maybe in her early 30s, sitting cross-legged beneath an oak tree about 30 yards away. Her clothes were worn and dirty, her dark curly hair wild around her face. She held a framed photograph close to her chest, rocking slightly. Margaret had seen her before. Over the past few months, the woman appeared in the cemetery regularly. Always near that same tree, always alone. Margaret had assumed she was mourning someone. The homeless often did their grieving in public spaces, she'd learned. They had nowhere else to go. Today, something about the woman's posture struck Margaret differently. She looked up and met Margaret's eyes. There was no shame in her gaze, no request for money, just recognition, human to human. Without planning to, Margaret found herself walking toward the oak tree. "Margaret?" David called, but she waved him off. As she approached, the woman stood awkwardly, clutching her photograph. Up close, Margaret could see she was younger than she'd first thought. The street's aged people made them look weathered beyond their years. "I'm sorry to disturb you," Margaret began. "You're not disturbing me, ma'am," the woman said. Her voice was soft but clear, educated. "I've seen you here before. You visit those 2 little boys." Margaret felt her throat tighten. "Yes, my sons, Christopher and Matthew." The woman nodded slowly. "I'm Jasmine. I come here because I don't have anywhere else to go. I'm sorry if I shouldn't be here." No, Margaret said quickly. "Everyone needs a place to grieve, or to think, or just to be." Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. "I had boys too, twins, 6 years old now. I see their faces every day, but I can't." Her voice broke. Margaret's heart clenched. "Where are they?" "St. Vincent's Orphanage. Across town." Jasmine wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "I lost my job 2 years ago. Tech company downsizing. I couldn't find another one in time. Lost my apartment. Lost everything. I tried shelters, but they wouldn't take us all together, and I couldn't let them see me like this. Living in my car, eating from food banks." She held up the photograph. 2 identical little boys with warm brown skin and bright smiles, dressed in tiny suits and bow ties. This was from their preschool graduation, before everything fell apart. "I gave them up 6 months ago. I thought it would be temporary. I thought I could get back on my feet and get them back. But it's so hard. The system, once they have your children, getting them back." Margaret couldn't explain what happened next. She'd driven past homeless people countless times. She'd donated to charities, volunteered at food drives. But she'd never taken someone home, never invited them into her life. "Come with me," Margaret heard herself say. Jasmine looked startled. "Ma'am, I have a guest room, and a shower, and more food than one person needs." Margaret surprised herself with her certainty. "You need help." "I can help. I couldn't possibly—" "Yes, you could." Margaret's voice was firm but kind. "We both lost our boys. Maybe we can help each other find our way back." David thought she'd lost her mind. He said so in carefully chosen words, after Jasmine had showered and fallen asleep in the guest room. "Margaret, you don't know this woman. She could be dangerous. She could rob you." "Did she look dangerous to you?" Margaret asked, pouring coffee. "She looked like someone who's been beaten down by life. Like she's forgotten who she was before it all went wrong. David sighed. You've always had a big heart. I just don't want to see you get hurt. I've already been hurt. David, the worst thing that could happen to me already happened 23 years ago. Everything else is just living. He studied her face in the kitchen light. You look different. More alive than I've seen you in years. Maybe that's because I have something to live for again. A purpose beyond just surviving each day. Jasmine stayed. Not just for a night, but for weeks. Then months. Margaret learned her story in pieces, over breakfast, coffee, and evening tea. Jasmine had been a web designer, talented and successful. She'd been a single mother, her twins born from a relationship that ended badly. She'd managed well enough until the company she worked for was acquired and her entire department eliminated. She'd had some savings, but not enough. Not nearly enough. I applied everywhere, Jasmine said one evening, her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. But when you're applying from a shelter address, or no address at all, nobody calls you back. And when I finally got an interview, I had nowhere to shower, nowhere to wash my clothes properly. I could see it in their eyes. They'd already decided. The system is cruel, Margaret said quietly. It's designed to help people, but it often just keeps them trapped. The worst part was telling Marcus and Julian that they had to go to the orphanage. They didn't understand. They kept asking when I was coming back for them. And I kept promising soon. Soon, baby. Mama's just getting things sorted out. But soon became months. And now we get them back, Margaret said firmly. Jasmine looked up, tears streaming down her face. We? Do you think I'd bring you into my home, into my heart, and not help you get your children back? Jasmine, I lost my boys. I can't bring them back, but I can help you find yours. If you'll let me. The legal process was complicated. St. Vincent's required proof of stable housing, steady income, and completion of parenting classes. Margaret stood beside Jasmine through it all. She helped Jasmine update her resume, bought her appropriate interview clothes, used her connections from years in education to find job leads. Jasmine landed a position as a junior web designer at a small agency. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Margaret attended every meeting with social workers, every court appearance. She wrote character references. She opened her home for home visits. She showed the system that Jasmine wasn't alone anymore, that she had support. 6 months after that day in the cemetery, on a bright April morning, they drove to St. Vincent's together. Marcus and Julian came running out the front door, their matching faces split with identical grins. Mama, Mama! Jasmine dropped to her knees and caught them both, sobbing into their hair. My babies! My sweet babies! Mama's so sorry. I'm so sorry. Are we going home? Marcus asked. Yes, baby. We're going home. To the place with Miss Margaret? Julian wanted to know. They'd had several visits over the past months. Yes. Miss Margaret has been very kind to let us stay with her. Marcus looked over his mother's shoulder at Margaret, who stood by the car trying not to cry. Is Miss Margaret going to be our grandma? Jasmine laughed through her tears. Would you like that? Yeah, both boys shouted. Margaret couldn't hold back anymore. She joined the embrace, wrapping her arms around all three of them. I would like that very much. They didn't leave Margaret's house. Jasmine offered repeatedly, once she'd saved enough for a deposit on an apartment. But Margaret wouldn't hear of it. This house has been too empty for too long, she said. It needs the sound of children's laughter. It needs life. David came for dinner regularly. He taught the boys to throw a baseball in the backyard. He sat patiently while they explained their video games to him. Margaret watched him become the grandfather he'd never had the chance to be. One evening, after the boys were in bed, the three adults sat on the back porch, listening to crickets chirp in the gathering darkness. You saved my life, Jasmine said quietly. Not just materially. You saved me from disappearing completely, from becoming invisible. You saved mine too, Margaret replied. I was just going through the motions, existing but not really living. You and those boys reminded me that life still has joy in it, that there's still purpose, still love. Jasmine reached over and squeezed Margaret's hand. Marcus asked me yesterday if you were an angel. What did you tell him? I told him yes. That sometimes angels look like regular people, and we have to pay attention or we might miss them. Margaret smiled in the darkness. I think maybe we were angels for each other, and we almost missed it. If you hadn't been brave enough to talk to me, If you hadn't been kind enough to see me as a person instead of just a homeless woman. They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies blink in the yard. David spoke up, his voice rough with emotion. Chris and Matt would have been 30 now. I think about that sometimes. What kind of men they would have become. He paused. I think they'd be proud of what you did, Margaret. How you turned your grief into something beautiful. I think they'd tell me it was about time, Margaret said with a watery laugh. Those boys never let me wallow. They were always pushing me to see the joy in things. Years passed. Marcus and Julian grew. Jasmine thrived in her career, eventually starting her own small web design firm. Margaret retired from her school administration job and became the world's most dedicated grandmother. Every October, on the anniversary, they all went to the cemetery together. Margaret and David still brought daisies, but now Marcus and Julian brought hand-drawn pictures to lay at the graves. Thank you for sending us, Miss Margaret, Julian said solemnly to the headstone one year. Margaret's heart squeezed. What makes you think they sent me? Because, Marcus answered with the simple logic of a child. You were sad and alone. We were sad and alone. Mama was sad and alone. And now none of us are alone anymore. That's how angels work, right? They connect people who need each other. Margaret looked at Jasmine, who was wiping her eyes. David put his arm around Margaret's shoulders. Yes, Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion. That's exactly how angels work. As they walked back to the car, Marcus slipped his hand into Margaret's. Miss Margaret? When I grow up, I want to help people who are invisible. Like you helped Mama. That's a beautiful dream, sweetheart. It's not just a dream, he said seriously. It's a plan. Julian and me, we're going to open a place where people can come when they have nowhere else to go. We already decided. Margaret looked down at the earnest face of the 7-year-old boy holding her hand. She thought about how a single moment of kindness, a single decision to see another person's humanity, could ripple out in ways you never imagined. I think that's the most wonderful plan I've ever heard, she said. And I'll be here to help you make it happen. Because that's what family did. Not just the family you were born into, but the family you chose. The family that life, in its mysterious wisdom, sometimes brought together in the most unexpected ways. In the cemetery that day, under an oak tree, 2 grieving women had seen each other, really seen each other, and in that moment of recognition, they'd given each other the greatest gift, hope. The knowledge that even in our darkest moments, we're not alone, that kindness still exists, that second chances are possible. That sometimes, when we open our hearts to help someone else, we end up healing ourselves. Margaret had learned that lesson at 58 years old. It was never too late to start living again. Never too late to choose love over fear. Never too late to become the person you were always meant to be. As they drove home through the autumn sunshine, with the boys chattering in the back seat about their school day, Margaret caught Jasmine's eye in the rearview mirror. Thank you, Jasmine mouthed silently. Margaret smiled, her heart full. Thank you, she mouthed back. Sometimes the people we save end up saving us. That's the beautiful mystery of human connection. The gentle wisdom that comes, if we're lucky, with age and experience and pain transformed into compassion. Ma'am, those twins are in the orphanage. 5 words that had changed everything. 5 words that had shown Margaret that her story wasn't over, that there were still chapters to be written, still love to be given and received, still purpose and joy and meaning to be found, all because one day she'd chosen to see, to really see, and to open her heart.